From where our friends were standing rose the tall spires of the royal palace, which glittered brightly against their background of blue sky. The palace was surrounded by charming grounds, full of flowers and shrubbery. Several tinkling fountains could be seen, and there were pleasant walks bordered by rows of white marble statuary. All these details Dorothy was, of course, unable to notice or admire until they had advanced along the road to a position quite near to the palace, and she was still looking at the pretty sights when her little party entered the grounds and approached the big front door of the king's own apartments. To their disappointment, they found the door tightly closed. A sign was tacked to the panel which read as follows: "Owner absent. Please knock at the third door in the left wing." "Now," said Tik-Tok to the captive wheeler, "you must show us the way to the left wing." "Very well," agreed the prisoner. "It is around here at the right." "How can the left wing be at the right?" demanded Dorothy, who feared the wheeler was fooling them. "Because there used to be 3 wings, and 2 were torn down, so the one on the right is the only one left. It is a trick of the Princess Langwidere to prevent visitors from annoying her." Then the captive led them around to the wing, after which the machine man, having no further use for the wheeler, permitted him to depart and rejoin his fellows. He immediately rolled away at a great pace and was soon lost to sight. Tik-Tok now counted the doors in the wing and knocked loudly upon the third one. It was opened by a little maid in a cap trimmed with gay ribbons, who bowed respectfully and asked, "What do you wish, good people?" "Are you the Princess Langwidere?" asked Dorothy. "No, miss, I am her servant," replied the maid. "May I see the princess, please?" "I will tell her you are here, miss, and ask her to grant you an audience," said the maid. "Step in, please, and take a seat in the drawing room." So Dorothy walked in, followed closely by the machine, but as the yellow hen tried to enter after them, the little maid cried, "Shoo!" and flapped her apron in Billina's face. "Shoo yourself," retorted the hen, drawing back in anger and ruffling up her feathers. "Haven't you any better manners than that?" "Oh, do you talk?" inquired the maid, evidently surprised. "Can't you hear me?" snapped Billina. "Drop that apron and get out of the doorway so that I may enter with my friends." "The princess won't like it," said the maid, hesitating. "I don't care whether she likes it or not," replied Billina, and fluttering her wings with a loud noise, she flew straight at the maid's face. The little servant at once ducked her head, and the hen reached Dorothy's side in safety. "Very well," sighed the maid. "If you are all ruined because of this obstinate hen, don't blame me for it. It isn't safe to annoy the Princess Langwidere." "Tell her we are waiting, if you please," Dorothy requested with dignity. "Billina is my friend and must go wherever I go." Without more words, the maid led them to a richly furnished drawing room, lighted with the subdued rainbow tints that came in through beautiful stained glass windows. "Remain here," she said. "What name shall I give the princess?" "I am Dorothy Gale of Kansas," replied the child, "and this gentleman is a machine named Tik-Tok, and the yellow hen is my friend Billina." The little servant bowed and withdrew, going through several passages and mounting 2 marble stairways before she came to the apartment occupied by her mistress. Princess Langwidere's sitting room was paneled with great mirrors, which reached from the ceiling to the floor. Also, the ceiling was composed of mirrors, and the floor was of polished silver that reflected every object upon it. So when Langwidere sat in her easy chair and played soft melodies upon her mandolin, her form was mirrored hundreds of times in wall and ceiling and floor, and whichever way that lady turned her head, she could see and admire her own features. This she loved to do, and just as the maid entered, she was saying to herself, "This head with auburn hair and hazel eyes is quite attractive. I must wear it more often than I have done of late, although it may not be the best of my collection." "You have company, your highness," announced the maid, bowing low. "Who is it?" asked Langwidere, yawning. "Dorothy Gale of Kansas, Mr. Tik-Tok, and Billina," answered the maid. "What a queer lot of names," murmured the princess, beginning to be a little interested. "What are they like? Is Dorothy Gale of Kansas pretty?" "She might be called so," the maid replied. "And is Mr. Tik-Tok attractive?" continued the princess. "That I cannot say, your highness, but he seems very bright. Will your gracious highness see them?" "Oh, I may as well, Nanda, but I am tired admiring this head, and if my visitor has any claim to beauty, I must take care that she does not surpass me. So I will go to my cabinet and change to number 17, which I think is my best appearance. Don't you?" Your number 17 is exceedingly beautiful, answered Nanda, with another bow. Again the princess yawned. Then she said, Help me to rise. So the maid assisted her to gain her feet, although Langweider was the stronger of the two, and then the princess slowly walked across the silver floor to her cabinet, leaning heavily at every step upon Nanda's arm. Now I must explain to you that the Princess Langweider had 30 heads, as many as there are days in the month, but of course she could only wear one of them at a time, because she had but one neck. These heads were kept in what she called her cabinet, which was a beautiful dressing room that lay just between Langweider's sleeping chamber and the mirrored sitting room. Each head was in a separate cupboard lined with velvet. The cupboards ran all around the sides of the dressing room and had elaborately carved doors with gold numbers on the outside and jeweled framed mirrors on the inside of them. When the princess got out of her crystal bed in the morning, she went to her cabinet, opened one of the velvet-lined cupboards, and took the head it contained from its golden shelf. Then, by the aid of the mirror inside the open door, she put on the head, as neat and straight as it could be, and afterwards called her maids to robe her for the day. She always wore a simple white costume that suited all the heads, for being able to change her face whenever she liked, the princess had no interest in wearing a variety of gowns, as have other ladies who are compelled to wear the same face constantly. Of course, the 30 heads were in a great variety. No two formed alike, but all being of exceeding loveliness. There were heads with golden hair, brown hair, rich auburn hair, and black hair, but none with gray hair. The heads had eyes of blue or gray, of hazel, of brown, and of black, but there were no red eyes among them, and all were bright and handsome. The noses were Grecian, Roman, retrousse, and Oriental, representing all types of beauty, and the mouths were of assorted sizes and shapes, displaying pearly teeth when the head smiled. As for dimples, they appeared in cheeks and chins, wherever they might be most charming, and one or two heads had freckles upon the face to contrast the better with the brilliancy of their complexion. One key unlocked all the velvet cupboards containing these treasures, a curious key carved from a single blood-red ruby, and this was fastened to a strong but slender chain which the princess wore around her left wrist. When Nanda had supported Langweider to a position in front of cupboard number 17, the princess unlocked the door with her ruby key, and after handing head number 9, which she had been wearing, to the maid, she took number 17 from its shelf and fitted it to her neck. It had black hair and dark eyes, and a lovely pearl and white complexion, and when Langweider wore it, she knew she was remarkably beautiful in appearance. There was only one trouble with number 17, the temper that went with it, and which was hidden somewhere under the glossy black hair, was fiery, harsh, and haughty in the extreme, and it often led the princess to do unpleasant things which she regretted when she came to wear her other heads. But she did not remember this today, and went to meet her guest in the drawing-room with a feeling of certainty that she would surprise him with her beauty. However, she was greatly disappointed to find that her visitors were merely a small girl in a gingham dress, a copper man that would only go when wound up, and a yellow hen that was sitting contentedly in Langweider's best work-basket, where there was a china egg used for darning stockings. It may surprise you to learn that a princess ever does such a common thing as darn stockings, but if you will stop to think, you will realize that a princess is sure to wear holes in her stockings, the same as other people, only it isn't considered quite polite to mention that matter. Oh, said Langweider, slightly lifting the nose of number 17. I thought someone of importance had called. Then you were right, declared Dorothy. I'm a good deal of importance myself, and when Billina lays an egg, she has the proudest cackle you have ever heard. As for Tik-Tok, he's the— Stop, stop, commanded the princess with an angry flash of her splendid eyes. How dare you annoy me with your senseless chatter? Why, you horrid thing, said Dorothy, who was not accustomed to being treated so rudely. The princess looked at her more closely. Tell me, she resumed, are you of royal blood? Better than that, ma'am, said Dorothy. I came from Kansas. Huh, cried the princess scornfully. You are a foolish child, and I cannot allow you to annoy me. Run away, you little goose, and bother someone else. Dorothy was so indignant that for a moment she could find no words to reply, but she rose from her chair and was about to leave the room when the princess, who had been scanning the girl's face, stopped her by saying more gently, "Come nearer to me." Dorothy obeyed, without a thought of fear, and stood before the princess while Langweiler examined her face with careful attention. "You are rather attractive," said the lady presently. "Not at all beautiful, you understand, but you have a certain style of prettiness that is different from that of any of my 30 heads, so I believe I'll take your head and give you number 26 for it." "Well, I believe you won't," exclaimed Dorothy. "It will do you no good to refuse," continued the princess, "for I need your head for my collection, and in the land of Ev my will is law. I never have cared much for number 26, and you will find that it is very little worn. Besides, it will do you just as well as the one you're wearing, for all practical purposes." "I don't know anything about your number 26, and I don't want to," said Dorothy firmly. "I'm not used to taking cast-off things, so I'll just keep my own head." "You refuse?" cried the princess with a frown. "Of course I do," was the reply. "Then," said Langweiler, "I shall lock you up in a tower until you decide to obey me. Nanda," turning to her maid, "call my army." Nanda rang a silver bell, and at once a big fat colonel in a bright red uniform entered the room, followed by 10 lean soldiers, who all looked sad and discouraged, and saluted the princess in a very melancholy fashion. "Carry that girl to the North Tower and lock her up," cried the princess, pointing to Dorothy. "To hear is to obey," answered the big red colonel, and caught the child by her arm. But at that moment Tik-Tok raised his dinner pail and pounded it so forcibly against the colonel's head that the big officer sat down upon the floor with a sudden bump, looking both dazed and very much astonished. "Help!" he shouted, and the 10 lean soldiers sprang to assist their leader. There was a great excitement for the next few moments, and Tik-Tok had knocked down 7 of the army, who were sprawling in every direction upon the carpet, when suddenly the machine paused, with the dinner pail raised for another blow, and remained perfectly motionless. "My action has run down," he called to Dorothy. "Wind me up, quick." She tried to obey, but the big colonel had by this time managed to get upon his feet again, so he grabbed fast hold of the girl, and she was helpless to escape. "This is too bad," said the machine. "I ought to have run 6 hours longer, at least, but I suppose my long walk and my fight with the wheelers made me run down faster than usual." "Well, it can't be helped," said Dorothy with a sigh. "Will you exchange heads with me?" demanded the princess. "No, indeed," cried Dorothy. "Then lock her up," said Langweiler to her soldiers, and they led Dorothy to a high tower at the north of the palace and locked her securely within. The soldiers afterward tried to lift Tik-Tok, but they found the machine so solid and heavy that they could not stir it, so they left him standing in the center of the drawing room. "People will think I have a new statue," said Langweiler, "so it won't matter in the least, and Nanda can keep him well polished." "What shall we do with the hen?" asked the colonel, who had just discovered Billina in the work-basket. "Put her in the chicken house," answered the princess. "Some day I'll have her fried for breakfast." "She looks rather tough, your highness," said Nanda doubtfully. "That is a base slander," cried Billina, struggling frantically in the colonel's arms, "but the breed of chickens I come from is said to be poisonous to all princesses." "Then," remarked Langweiler, "I will not fry the hen, but keep her to lay eggs, and if she doesn't do her duty, I'll have her drowned in the horse trough."